All right, we're back, and it's COMP397, and it's fall 2015 session, week 4, lesson 4, part 4. And we're talking about, we've moved away from talking about the state machine. We're pretty much done with the state machine now. And what I want to move into is into this new piece I want to talk about, which is I've got my init function. This is my init function right here, but I'm not really loading anything. And what I'm doing is, it's kind of a lazy thing I'm doing, right? Let me just talk about what I've done so far. So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer here again, pin this up, and I'm going to go into my my objects. I'm going to minimize some of this stuff so we can get a little bit closer to what it looks like. I'm going to go into my my objects, and in my objects I have button, label, and scene, right? In my button, this is where my problem is. If I double-click my button, I'm actually hard coding in a path in my super class, called my super class, because what it's doing is it's taking a path string, this is my path string, and an X and Y location for my button, and I'm physically sending this stuff into my super class, which is not really a great idea. So how do I fix this without doing this? Because every time I do this, I do a call to the file system, and I don't want that. I'll go back to my game, and I need to put another function up here. I'm going to prepare by doing this. I'm going to say function, and we'll call this preload, my preload function, which is also going to return void, right? A preload function. Now it's going to be, I'm just placing it physically above init, but right now it's not being called, right? Let's see what we do for a preloading perspective up in create.js. So if I go preload JS, right? And if I look at this preload.js library, and I look at docs for preload.js, I have some really good examples of this. I have something called a queue, right? And I'm actually loading, I'm using this create.js load queue event, or this method, if you will, load queue. And I'm also doing things like this. This is where I install my sound plugin. So I could have done sound earlier, but it would have been a real pain in the ass. We would have been going down a rabbit hole. It would have taken us a lot longer to do it. But here, when I install my sound plugin, right, I can create another event called complete, right? So when my load is complete, right, when my asset load, right, my load queue, if you will, is complete, it's loaded, everything is loaded, then I need to fire off some kind of a handler that fires, that triggers when I've loaded everything. And I also have something else. I have a manifest that I'm going to load, right? That's going to include key value pairs. So here's my image and my path to my image, right? Or my sound and my path to my sound, right? That's what I'm going to do here. And when I want to play my sound like this, right? I'm just going to call it by saying create.js.sound.play sound, whatever the sound is. That's neat. That's neat. That's nice and easy for me. All right. Okay, cool. So this is the pattern that I'm going to use. It's right here online, right? And I need to put all this inside of my method. I don't need a handle complete. That's going to be my handle complete function. My init, right? As soon as I finish loading everything, I'm going to call my init function and initialize my stage. But until I load my assets, I'm not going to call my stage and populate stuff in my canvas, because my canvas doesn't have any assets at the beginning, right? It shouldn't have anything. So let's do this. Let's just copy these lines up to here, right? So I'm here up in my Preload.js API modules, my documentation. I'm just going to copy these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, let's say. Right-click and copy. And I'm going to go back into my code here, and inside my preload, right, I'm going to right-click and paste. There it is. Now I'm defining a queue, and it's in this local space, this local namespace space called preload, right? But this queue isn't really the right name. What am I really doing here? I'm loading my assets. So when this could be called assets, right? If you will. That's what I'm really loading, my assets. So let's do that. So let's call my queue, let's rename this thing, refactor, rename, from queue to assets. Let's see what that does. That's okay. So that's my first thing. So I've changed my queue to assets. So assets dot on complete load. I'm loading my assets, right? I could also call this load assets. Load assets, right? So load assets install plugin. Load assets done complete. I have to read. I want to make it human readable. When I look at my stuff, it's got to make sense when I read it. Okay, let's do this again. So instead of assets, let's rename this thing to load assets. Just bear with me here when we do this. We're going to play with this a little bit. So load, right? Assets, capital A, assets, load assets. That's what we're going to call this. So here's load assets. Right? So var load assets is equal to a new load queue. I don't want this. This is bad. I want to make my assets a global game framework variable, right? My load assets. Okay, so I'm going to do that up here. So I'm going to say before my canvas and before my stage, I'm going to create, before there was light, right? There was darkness. Var, I'm going to say load assets, right? And we're going to have to define a kind for this thing. What is it? We're going to talk about this. I'm going to leave it like this for a second. And I don't have to define it down here anymore, right? Because it's loaded up here. Okay, so it's a kind of a global variable now, assets. Okay, cool. We're going to see that this may change, by the way. We might rename this one more time. So I want to talk about when I want you always to think about this. Whatever it's called, you should be able to read what it says. The line should be almost human readable when you read it. If it doesn't make sense, you misnamed it somehow. I want you to think about that name. And I don't care if it's here, in C#, in Java, whatever you're doing. If it doesn't make sense when you read the method, right? Like load assets on complete, that's what I'm saying. When my load assets are complete, that's what I'm saying, then do something. Initialize or whatever, right? Okay. So that's the first thing. So let's try this. So load assets is one. Now what type is load assets? I need to make it something. And if I scroll, if I kind of hover over this thing, it says constructor create.js.loadQueue, and then it says prefer XHR or Boolean. These are some options that I can put in. I can also ask for cross origin, so it doesn't give me cross origin errors in Google Chrome. And it's also of type create.js.loadQueue, and that's what my type is going to be. So my type over here, if I've done this correctly, is create.js.loadQueue, right? That's what my load assets are going to be. Okay. Cool. I got a problem here. We're going to fix this problem in a second, right? My create.js.sound. All right. And if I was to undo that change, let me just undo that change for a second. So I'm going to undo this for a second, right? And if you notice, when I do this, it takes away my error, right, to create.js.sound, right? No, so here's, if I take my load assets away, so I make it like this, right? My create.js.sound complains, right, because my class works fine as long as I don't type my variable that's incoming, right? It's almost like I need to make it it's going to be of type create.js.loadQueue for sure. That's what's going to happen, create.js.loadQueue, right? But then what's happening is this install plugin, look what it says. It says any, install plugin any. And what I'm expecting is when I load it up, there's only so many things I want to load up. Well, let's see if I do this. If I type it in myself, if I say load assets dot install plugin, see, I'm not getting any code. I'm not getting any code hinting because I don't know what kind of thing load assets is, and that's why we type it. We go load assets, right, and then again create.js dot load queue, right? Okay, cool. Let's see what happens when I type it by hand. Load assets then dot install plugin, and I open it up. It says I can take any. My plugin is any. That's what it does. Now this definition is inside my preload.d.ts, right? This problem I'm getting with create.js sound, right? It's listing for a generic of type any, right? Sometimes these generics in this particular context causes problems. So we're going to flip the bird to Mr. TypeScript for a second. And I'll tell you in a second how that works. And we're going to try and take away this error by messing with our type definition file, because this is correct. This isn't wrong, actually, right? And everything else works just that as a problem, right? So let's go back into Explorer, and we'll pin this up. And we'll go into my type definition libraries under typings. And for the first time, we're going to modify one of these typings. We're going to go into our preload JS file and double-click onto it. And we can look at what a preload, a type definition library looks like. Here it is. Now take a look. I've got my create.js, and somewhere down here, I've got something called install plugin. Let's find this install plugin function. So I'm going to kind of do a Control F, and I'm going to start looking for install plugin. There it is, right? So instead of it being a plugin, it's looking for a plugin that returns any. Let's just make it any. I'm just going to rewrite this, my type definition file, to any, which means, don't worry, don't give me code hinting. It takes whatever I put into it. That's bad, but it takes away our error, and it's that annoying error, and it allows us to compile. This is something of, it could be a type definition problem that they made when we did this to really do TypeScript, right? Let's go back and see if that's eliminated our error now that I've saved. So I'm saving this, go back to my game.ts, and take a look at my create.js sound is no problem now. So go back, let me show you. I found my install plugin, where it mentions install plugin in my preload.js.d.ts, which is inside of my typings folder under preload.js.d.ts. That's what I did. And I modified my install plugin definition, my abstract definition for install plugin. That's what it is, because this is what tells me my code hinting. This is all my code hinting files. That's what they are. And I've modified this so it accepts what my input is, anything I want. Don't worry about it for now. We might be able to correct this later on. We may not. Okay, now my error is gone. So if you notice, if I just move up a little bit inside this, how big it is so you can see it better, my error for create.js.sound is gone. So my plugin is working, right? I know it would work anyway. Okay, good. Now my complete has an error. Why is this an error? Because this has got a point to init. So let's rename this from complete handle complete to init. So now it's going to call my init function, which has already been written down here. All right. Okay. Here's what I don't want. I don't want to do this load file crap. So this has got to go. I want to load my manifest, that's for sure, right? My manifest is going to happen, right? But my manifest, this load assets, load manifest, you know, again, I'm tempted to rename this thing again to something else, but because now it doesn't make any sense. Load assets, install plugin, create.js sound, right? So we'll talk about this, right? And the other one is load assets, load manifest. Assets, load manifest. Maybe assets by itself is still better, right? I think I'm just reading it. I'm just playing with it with you guys, just so that we just get it right the first time. So refactor, rename again, one more time. Going waffling here. Assets, load manifest. Assets incomplete. Assets install plugin. That makes sense to me. Now here's what I want to do. This, right, is my data. That's what this is. This is data that I'm loading in, right? This is all my. These are all my assets. These are all my actual my manifest. This is what I want to load in. I don't have to do this. I can create this as as an actual object, right? I'll make this under game objects. I'm gonna make a space. I'm going to say var. By the way, you could load this from a file if you wanted to use jQuery or whatever to load from a file, which is not a bad thing to do. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to say var data then is equal to an array. Right? That's what this is, an array of data. I'm just going to chop this off. Watch. Cut. And I'm going to put it in here. Paste. And I'm going to kind of put it like this. Okay. My image, this is just thing. And down here where it says assets load manifest, we're going to load data in here, right? We're going to pass data, the data method we just did, or variable we just described up here, we're going to pass into our manifest. Okay, cool. So we've done this now. All right, here's where we get funky. I'm going to go into, just to fix all this, right? This is all the work to do for preloading. Stop debugging. I'm going to go into my Solution Explorer for a second, and I'm going to look at my assets, what I have right now. And right now I don't have any audio assets. I only have image assets. We're going to get some audio assets for us, right? Here's my back button, right? And here's my next button, and here's my start button. Well, that's what my assets are all called, right? So let's get those. So I'm going to kind of copy the whole thing, right? That's what it is. That's what the path to the button is. And I know my path, right? So there's two pieces to it. My back button itself is what it's called. So I'm going to grab this piece. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to also do this one time. Watch. So this is going to be called back button. And my path to the button is the following. Let's type it in. Assets / images / back button .ping is my actual button, right? And let's add to this array, right? By putting a comma in place, and add my next asset in this object. This is an object array, right? Here we go. Here's my next object. Instead of back button, we're going to call this next button. So we're defining my objects here and loading them all at once. Okay. And one more time. And now this is my start button. This is like in order, like how we see it. Here's my start button. Assets, images, start button, right? Okay. Now, we've preloaded everything, and it's when we preload this data, this is our data we're loading from our image, from our assets images. This is good now. And this is our, these are, you know, if anything, this could be also called, instead of data, this could be called manifest. Let's rename this thing from data to manifest, because we're loading manifest. Refactor, rename, manifest. And our manifest, this manifest that we're getting right now, is a manifest of all of our assets. Manifest of all our assets, right? Now you could certainly put this in another file, something like a config file, right? Where you don't have to share it here in the global namespace. So I can certainly put it in config. I won't do it right now, right? But I could. Let's leave this out. This is like almost like a, you could read this from a file. You could have a whole other function that reads this manifest from a file or a database, right? Like I can link it to Azure and read key value pairs from a Mongo database or something like that. I could do all kinds of stuff instead of reading it from here, right? So I don't have to physically read my assets here. I can kind of create a database of assets. Okay, but for now it's simple. But you can see the applications that I'm talking about here. Okay, there's still a change I need to make. So actually a couple changes. One is my index.html. Let's go into my index.html for a second, because we need to make a change there. Right now, if you look at my index.html, I go body unload is equal to a init. That can't work anymore. It's got to go body unload preload, right? So that's where it's going to go, preload. That's what's going to fire, my preloader, right? In my index.html, I've got to change my unload event handler or my event to preload. It's going to basically fire my preload function in the global namespace. The only one that's available in my global namespace is in my game.ts file in the core folder, right? Here it is, which is my preload function. When my preload function enters all this information, then and only then will it fire off my init function on complete. When it finishes loading this, when it's completely finished loading these assets, it's going to kick off my init function, and then I will set off my canvas, my stage, and blah, blah, and play. This is a preload. Now, this is nice, but we're not using it. We're just loading everything. It's almost like another step for nothing, right? How do I use it? That's the next step. Well, we got to look at my button class to give us a hint. Here's my super, right? And I don't want this to be the way it is. I want to basically pass in an object to my, because my super class, right, instead of a path string, right, as an example, it can't be a path string anymore. It's going to be a blob right into there, right? Because it is a bitmap. And if I go back online to see my documentation, I can see how I use my bitmap later on. How do I use my bitmap? How do I load this thing, right? It's not load file, right? I need to use another method in order for me to use this thing, right? So I got to say something like this. I got to say assets dot get result, and then I got to call, right, the function. And for me to do this, for you to understand what I'm talking about here, I'm going to go to my preload.js file here. And this in the main file, a lot of times what we have is properties. And here's my index. One of them has an index that tells me all the stuff. Here's my load queue. Hold on a second here. My load queue. So if you notice, here's on file load, on complete. You can listen for different events that I'm doing. Here's my manifest. Here's my queue, right? And how do I do it so I can fire up my my stuff? I want to kind of load up my stuff and then use it later on, right? How do I use it? Well, I need to use another function in here. So I go back into my game to show you this, right? So I've got it, and now inside on the bottom inside my function, I've got to say something like this: assets dot get result, and I got to call the name of my asset, right? Then I'm going to send that into my function. So I got to do that in here. So in my button class is the first place I do that. But should I do it in my button class, or should I do it because I'm going to get a path string, and my path string is going to be my superclass, right? I'm going to take my path string, and that string is going to be what I'm going to use. So here my button class is where the only time I have to do it, and I'm going to get rid of all this. And this is where you're going to use assets for the first time. You're going to say assets get results, right? And then in brackets, right? You're going to say the name of the object, which is going to be path string. So whatever that path string is, right? That path string is what you're going to get. Now I'm getting a problem with this line, right? And what is it giving me? It's saying argument of type object is not assignable of parameter of type HTML element, HTML canvas element, HTML video element, and or string. Type object is not assignable to a string. So I could cast this as a string, because that's really what it is, right? It is already a string right here. I'm taking it as a string. But really what I'm looking at is my get result method, which is back to my preload method that we just looked at, my preload.d.ts file. So to finish this off, I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer, pin this up. My silly typings. Remember, this isn't perfect, right? And I'm going to look up get results. And look what it's telling me in my get result method. Here's my get result method. It's saying I can take a value any, a result Boolean, right? That's what it's taking in, my get result, right? Value, and it's of type object. It's the return type is object, right? That's not the return type. The return type should be string, right? My get result to return a what I'm gonna call it. It's going to be an object, but it takes a value of any and a raw result. That's what it takes in here. So when I do my get result, it takes these two things. It's right next to get loaded items and all this other stuff. Okay. Let's go back and see if I can understand this with you, right? So I don't confuse anybody. So in my button, the reason why this is bad is because my definition for my superclass, it's not my get result that's the problem. My get result is returning an object, right? It's my my definition for my easel.js, which is listening for bitmap. Let's try this out. So here's my easel.js d.ts, and now we're looking up another one. Control F, and I'm going to say bitmap. Here's my class bitmap. It extends the display object, and the constructor is listening for image or URL, HTML element, or HTML element, or HTML video element, or string, which is what it is, or that's what I'm going to put in there. Any. When I do that and press save, right, and I go back to my button, no error, right? I know you're gonna yell at me now, right? But it still gives me my other typings, right? It still says, hey, they'll take almost anything. Right? I'm doing that because what I'm trying to do is make a custom class and my d.ts file doesn't understand what I'm trying to do, I know this should work, but this is what's going to happen. My path string is going to pass to this, and then I'm going to produce my anything I want. And my path string is just going to be the name of my file. And if you know I'm calling it, just to go to back to my Solution Explorer, just to make sure this is all correct before because I'm messing up big time if I do. I blow up my files now, right? I got to go back to my browser. I got to go back to my states for a second, right? Which is in my states folder, and let's just look at one of them. Let's look at my menu state. And my menu state is saying game start, but it's sending in the start button. Start button is the right name, right? That's the path string that I need to access my manifest, which is right here. Here's my start button. That's telling me where this thing is. Make sense? Now here's something. I'm accessing my assets. Here's the question. Because where I am right now, I'm in my game.ts, which is in my core file. I got to go up one to scripts. I go to another one up one to assets. So I got to put in here, if I'm not wrong, I got to do one of these, ... Because otherwise, I'm not going to have the right path name, and I'm going to get an error, right? That's going to say, don't know the path. It's an asset unknown or whatever. I can't load this. I'm going to get a 404 error. Okay, if I've done everything correctly, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to go build solution for the final time, right? Here's my build succeeded. And I'm going to play everything. And if I've done everything correctly, then I should get my assets. Let's refresh. And now we're good. Now we're doing everything else, but everything is being preloaded as opposed to how it was before when it was loading manually. Yep.
What did you change in easel.js?
I went to easel.js. I'm sorry. I know I went fast. I went to easel.js and I changed I looked up my bitmap class and I added or any. This pipe is an or. It'll accept anything in the constructor now, right? But it also give me it'll give me the constructor image or URL and any, right? Which is kind of cool. I could have wiped this out and just put any too. But the reason why I did that in my bitmap is because it has a problem. It's the way the d.ts file has been constructed. And I'm okay with it because I know it's going to work. I've done this so many times, I know, right? I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just that my typing is a little wonky. Okay, cool. So I've got everything working. Let's add a couple sounds, right? Like for example, I know I have a couple sounds from my mail pilot assets that I used before, right? Like a yay sound. I use the yay sound. So every time I click a button, I'm going to go yay as a sound, right? How do I do that? So let's go back to my assets, and I think I'm still recording, so I think we're still good. I'm not messing things up yet, right? Let's see if I can go to my mail pilot assets. And I got my fonts with my doc51, and I got my audio, right? So I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my mail pilot assets for now. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to go back over to this namespace into my file server. Close this off now just so I don't kill it. Let's see if I even have it. I may have already done it in prep for you guys. Let's just say paste. See what happens. Yay. Mail pilot assets, right? So now what I can do, because I have this file, I have my audio, my fonts, and my sprites. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to just put it up on GitHub for you so you all have it. Right? So just bear with me while I do this. I'm going to stop. Yeah, give me 1 second. So, and I'm going to copy and paste my audio and fonts in there. So I have everything that you have, everything that I have. So I have my doc51. I'm going to put that into my. Well, I got to stop debugging. How about that first? I'm going to try that again. I'm going to take this file, my doc51. Bear with me, guys. Don't leave yet. Doc51. Put this in my fonts because I'm going to use my doc51 as part of my fonts. I'm going to try change over later on. And I'm also going to go into my audio and grab these 3 sounds we can play with. I'm going to put them in my audio files. There they are. And so I've got my audio now. All right, so now, just to keep on the same page, I'm going to go to Team Explorer, and I'm going to go home, just so you have what I have, and go to Changes, and make sure that I include all changes and everything there. I'm going to say Added Preloader project. Right? I'm going to commit, save everything. I'm going to go home, I'm going to unsync commits, and I'm going to sync. When I do that, you should have all my assets too. So you have those little files. So you don't have to find new little sound files. So you can do what I do. Okay, it's up on GitHub now. Okay, now that we've got that, I want to add to my manifest. So Jay, just for you, buddy. Here's the sound that goes on. Okay, I'm going to copy this. We're going to add our first sound to my assets. We're going to call it the yay sound, right? So here we go. We're going to go to here, and we're going to go yay like this, right? That's what I'm going to call it. But it's not going to be asset images. It's going to be assets audio, right? If I'm not wrong. Let's take a look at my Solution Explorer. Assets audio, and we're going to say yay.og. Now here's a problem with yay.og. It don't like. And it needs to be an MP3 file. Let's try this out. Yay.og. Right, so here it is. So here's my yay sound. And now what I want to do is when I click my button, anytime I click my button, any button, right, I'm going to, in my click event, right, I'm going to play a yay sound. So I don't need my button class. I actually need my menu.ts class, only for my start button. Let's make it there, right? So before I play I go to my state, my play state. This is where it gets wonky now, right? I'm going to play my sound, but I'm not going to change my state. Let's just what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so I can't change states for a second, because if I change states, my sound will be wiped out, right? So we'll do this. We'll see create.js.sound.play, and we'll make this the yay sound, which I know what it is, right? So if I've done everything correctly, I should be able to rerun everything. It'll rebuild my function, my call, and refresh everything. And when I click on my button, it should say yay.
Yay. Yay. Yay.
I know it's funny, right? But my point is, if I was to, the reason why I took away this line here, let me go back to my menu. The reason why I commented out my change state is because if I try and play yay and then change states, it's going to be wiped away. So before I press the yay, I make the yay sound, my whole yay is going to be gone. Let's change that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Watch. So I'm going to say yay, and then it's going to be gone. Watch. So I'm going to refresh now. I've taken away the comments. I uncommented everything now. So now it's going to move. Okay, let's see what it happens. So I'm going to go start, and now it's going to say nothing. Watch.
Yay.
Oh, it fired. So that's not bad, actually. That's pretty good. But that's a problem for me, right? Because that means that if it fired without being destroyed, right, that means that we might have a leak. Because if I'm playing a game and I go back, I may have to silence my files or wipe them away because they're not part of I haven't loaded them onto the scene, you see? So they're not being wiped away. So that's the topic of the next week. We're going to talk about that next week when we get into your next assignment 2, the slot machine. Remember that your assignment 1, I'm moving it to Monday at midnight. Any questions before we stop? All right, I'll update this to GitHub, and I'll stop recording, and I'll upload your changes to eCentral. All right?